Hi everyone, the conversation with Nadine Matheson is currently on a little summer break, but don't worry, I'll be back with brand new episodes in September. But in the meantime, I'll be sharing some fan favourite episodes from season 3, along with a few special conversations from page 1, the Writers Podcast, that I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you so much for all your support throughout season 3. It's been amazing to see the podcast grow, and I'm truly grateful to everyone who's listened, shared and supported us, especially those of you who bought me a cup of coffee on Ko-fi. It really does make a difference. Now, as always, sit back, we'll go for a walk and enjoy this summer break conversation.
When I did finish my first book, and of course what I did was completely the wrong way round. I'd written now one scene, and I decided to create an entire book around that scene. That is not the way to write a book, ladies and gentlemen. Try and have a plot idea first.
Hello and welcome to The Conversation with Nadine Matheson. As always, I hope that you're well and I hope that you've had a good week. Now, before I sat down to record the intro for this week's podcast, I was scrolling through social media. I was scrolling through threads and I came across a post by an author. And in the post, there was a picture of a table in a bookshop and all their books were on the table. And this person had said, and I'm only laughing because it's happened to me. It's happened to authors who have appeared on this podcast. It's happened to everyone who's written a book and has gone to do an appearance. And this author, they said that no one turned up. And, you know, when you do an appearance, you do an event, whether it's in a bookshop, whether it's in a library, if you're signing books at a festival, you want there to be a queue of people and you want the queue of people to be for you. And if you're in a bookshop, you don't just want the queue to be inside the shop. You want to have that moment when you walk up to the bookshop and you see a line of people outside and you want to be able to say, they're here for me. For some reason, it's a sign that you've made it. Not the fact that you may have hit the bestsellers chart times in a row. It's not that. It's the fact that you've got a queue of people wanting to see you and they've got copies of their books waiting for you to sign and they're going to buy all the hardback copies and your back catalogue of your books. And this person had posted that no one came up. And another author posted, yeah, I did an event and 3 people turned up. Another one posted, I did an event, 1 person turned up. I did an event. I travelled to an event in Birmingham in the Midlands and it was me and 2 other authors. And this event had been advertised for weeks. It wasn't like it just appeared out of nowhere. It had been advertised for weeks. And, you know, I had to drive there, spend a night in a hotel because it was an evening event and obviously drive home. There were, and I'm not even lying, there were 6 people in the audience. 4 of the audience were staff members, so they worked in the library. And 2 had obviously come in. 1 person out of the 2 that were left had paid because I remember it was pouring down with rain. And I think the second person had just strolled into the library in order to escape the rain. And they just sat down and listen to us talk. So the reason why I'm bringing it up is that it will happen to you. You know, the lottery saying it could be you. Well, you as an author turning up to an event and there only being 1 person there or no one there except the staff, it will happen to you. And I just think it's a rite of passage. It's the more truer way of showing that you've made it. So if it does happen, don't be upset. Honestly, don't be upset. Because I guarantee if you were to go through all of my past conversations that I've had on this podcast, there wouldn't be 1 author who has not experienced not having anybody or just having 1 person or just talking to the staff at an event. It happened to me again at a library event in Southeast London and it was just me appearing. So it's kind of like an in conversation thing with me. And I think only 6 people turned up. So there were 6 people sitting in the chairs waiting for me to talk. But there were people in the library, you know, there were little kids running around looking for their parents. There were students there doing their work, adults there. There were people around, but only 6 of them were there to see me. And I just told them to just bring their chairs forward. Let's form a nice little circle. Let's pretend we're sitting in my living room and we'll just have a chat. And you can ask me any questions you want. And in a funny way, because it was smaller, I think it was less intimidating for the audience members, because sometimes when you get to the end and it's a large crowd, and you say, are there any questions? It takes a lot for someone to raise their hand and ask a question, because not everyone likes speaking in public. But in a funny way, that very small setting and making it intimate and making it cozy, it worked. So my advice, don't be upset if no one turns up to your event. It happens to everyone and you will be fine. Right, let's get on with the show. This week, I'm in conversation with Sunday Times bestselling author Karen Swan. And in our conversation, we talk about how other people can recognise your talents before you do, acting on those sliding door moments in your life, and how you shouldn't write for the market. Now, as always, sit back, we'll go for a walk and enjoy the conversation. Karen Swan, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm very happy to have you here. Right, my first question for you, because when I was going through, no, it wasn't that. I've got your new book with me, All I Want for Christmas, and I think it's the first page I opened up, and I saw the long list of your previous books, and I said to myself, I didn't realise it was so many. I didn't realise.
I feel the same. People say to me, how many have you written? And I go, I don't know. I sort of stopped counting once we got to the mid-20s.
Well, I counted 26 and I was like, that's absolutely, it's amazing and also crazy. But I think the question that popped into my mind was, did you ever envision yourself, way back then when you was writing that first book, that you would be here at book number 26?
Literally never. And in fact, I can remember a very specific conversation I used to be a journalist, with another journalist friend of mine. We were sitting in Kensington Park Gardens. It was like the mid-90s, late 90s. Yeah, late 90s. And she's now an author, and she had asked me to read an article she'd written. And I said to her, this is so beautiful. You write so beautifully. And she said, I really want to go into fiction. I really want to write a book. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And she said, don't you feel like you have a book in you? And I went, no.
Really?
Like, it had not crossed my mind, and it still didn't cross my mind then. And she went on to write a book that did incredibly well, and I was just in awe. But I still wasn't ever thinking, well, I'll do that. And I was such an accidental author. I loved writing, but I had never written fiction. I did an English degree. I consider myself like a professional grade reader. I read avidly and obsessively, and I love language and I loved my job. But at no point did I ever think, oh, well, I'm going to go into fiction and make up stories. I mean, that was just like a whole other skill set that I just didn't think I had. And the weird thing was that I had my first baby, and as a sort of project while I was on maternity leave, I wrote this non-fiction book. It was a pregnancy book with my doctor. And it turned out her other clients, as well as me, were Kate Moss, Gwyneth Paltrow, the great and the good. So I was like, okay, well, we have here a very commercial product. We can make this a book. And so it was the agent for that book who said to me, go into fiction. And I thought she was mad. I thought she was I said, why would you say that? I've never done any training. I've never done a course. I have no idea how you would go about writing a book. And she said, sit down and just write something, anything, write 2,000 words. And I only had to go because my parents-in-law turned up at the house unexpectedly one day, really sweetly saying, Karen, go and have a day to yourself. Which was a disaster because all my friends had their babies. So they weren't available to come out with me because they were looking after their babies.
Yeah.
And we had no money, so I couldn't go shopping for the day. And I thought, God almighty, what am I going to do? I've got a day with nothing to do and I've got no baby to occupy me. And so I went to the library and I took my laptop and I just sat down and I had no story idea, no plot, no character, nothing. I just closed my eyes and I wrote a scene. And the weird thing was, the moment I did it, it was like my entire brain made sense. And I just thought, it was like a eureka moment where I thought, oh my God, that actually reads like something you would read in a book. Like I couldn't understand how I had put these down. Like it was a bit of prose, but it was mainly dialogue. And it just worked so easily. And I thought, oh, and I suddenly realized that I had been telling stories in my head my entire life. But I just thought that everybody did that. I thought that's what brains do. I thought that was everyone's experience. Like I didn't think that was being a creative person or being a writer. I just thought everyone did that. And of course, my husband's an accountant. His brain does not do that.
It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. It was just a weird thing because it was a moment where I suddenly realized like, oh my God, I can do this. And this is what I am supposed to do. And there are moments where even now I sort of get the heebie-jeebies because I think, what if I had never sat down and decided to have a go? Because it sort of altered the course of my life. It's definitely been massively emotionally fulfilling for me because it's how my brain works and it's what I should be doing. And I just think there was no good reason for me to, if someone hadn't said to me, Karen, sit down and just do that, I never would have done it. And I just think, how many other people out there maybe should be writers and they don't know it, or they should be other things and they don't know it because they haven't got the opportunity, or it just hasn't occurred to them to try to do this thing.
Yeah, I always find it amazing though sometimes how someone else can see something in you that you just can't see that thing for yourself. So your agent saying to you, you can write a fiction book. You're like, what on earth what is there about my personality or the way in which I wrote an email, for example, that makes you think I should be writing I should write in a book of fiction?
And that's the thing. I think that it is other people who see it in you first sometimes, or most of the time. It was for me, my entire childhood, all my school reports, English would, but even in other subjects, they would talk about my writing style. And I used to think everyone has a writing style, like surely. And so I never paid any attention. And then, you do those sort of psychometric tests and they say, I think mine said I was going to go into shipbroking, firefighting, and author. Now, of course, maybe I should have gone into shipbroking. Maybe I've got even greater skills in that area that I don't know about. But as it is, I've ended up in writing and I'm very happy about it. And let's not think about me doing a fireman's lift up a ladder. I mean, that wouldn't end well for anyone. But other people could see it. And like I would write a thank you card after a dinner or something. And people would make a comment about, oh my God, your card. And I always used to think, why the fuss? Like,
yeah, it's just a card.
And it was other people could see that there was just something, maybe a little bit more than the ordinary. And I didn't see it, or it just wasn't crossing my mind. And so I think for other people, if they are thinking maybe they're not quite living the life they should be living or doing the thing they should be doing, maybe ask the people around you, what do you think I'm best at? Because I can't imagine. It's sort of really, it's like a sliding doors moment of if I hadn't gone to the library that day, would I still be doing what I had been doing, which was print media, which was wonderful, but it was a great for time in my life. It was fashion. I was young. I was in my 20s. It was all brilliant, party, fashion shows, you name it, amazing. Travel, loved it. But now I have a family, I'm 110, I don't want to be doing, that life anymore. And this just gives me so much. I feel so privileged that I get to wake up every morning and get to work in my house with my gorgeous dogs by my feet. You know, I get to go for a walk in the forest and my hair comes back absolutely enormous with humidity and I look crazy, but it doesn't matter because no one cares what I look like all day. And I just get to live in my head. And for me, that is absolutely the best way to live my life.
It is. But I was thinking, you know, there's always those pivotal moments in your life, you know, as you described it, those sliding door moments where if you just decided, well, I'm not going to go to the library, I'm just going to go and sit in a coffee shop and maybe just read a magazine for the afternoon, things could have been so completely different. And I always feel that there's always a moment in someone's life when you need to make that pivot. And then that leads you to the thing that you should have been doing all along.
And that's the thing, because my journalism career, I was doing really well. I had a great salary. I had a lovely life. I worked for a big employer. And then when I did finish my first book, and of course what I did was completely the wrong way round. I'd written now one scene and I decided to create an entire book around that scene. That is not the way to write a book, ladies and gentlemen. Try and have a plot idea first, rather than, you know, a scene with some characters and then you develop outwards. So I did it the hard way, and it took about 2 years to write this book because I had my daughter in between again. So I lost maybe 8-9 months to that baby fog. And I wrote the book, and it was, I got an agent, she sent it off, and then I got my offer for the book, and like, it was pennies. And I was like, I can't sustain, like I have to earn. And I can't, I was going to turn it down because I was like, I'm going to make more money.
Really?
Yeah. And I just didn't go back to the agent because I was so upset. Like I was crying.
What were you expecting?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Cosmic Muse Volume 1, Your Voice, Mercury. It's not just an ebook. It's a sacred portal. A guided activation for your personal voice codes. Through intuitive prompts, poetic rituals, and Mercury's magic, you'll reconnect with the truth that's been waiting to rise within you. Download now at penniesandprose.com. Begin the journey back to your voice.
Oh, because the friend of mine who I had the chat with in Kensington Park Art, she'd had this mega first book and done incredibly well. So I'd sort of heard through the grapevine of that. I'd also heard through the grapevine of another journalist who had done incredibly well. She'd got like a 3-book deal and she'd bought a house off the back of it. Like, amazing.
Oh, wow.
And I got this offer. And I just thought, I cannot afford to take this. Like, this is not viable. And I was going to turn it down. And it was my mother. She turned around to me and she said, darling, you must give this a go. She like really believed in my ability. I don't know why, because she hadn't read the book at this point, but she really believed in my ability to do this, or for some reason she felt like this was my path. I'm not sure. But she was the one who said to me, you must go for it. And she said, you will find a readership. She said, I know you will find people who love what you're doing. How could she have known that, of course? I mean, no one could have known that. But it's your mum, right? So if your mum tells you to go do this, it doesn't matter if you're in your 20s and your 30s, you still go do it. So I took it. And of course, my children at this point were like 0, 2, and 4. Like I was really in the thick of it all. It was really difficult. We couldn't afford a nanny. I was having to rely on my mum and my mother-in-law to come in and look after the baby, do the nursery school pickups, all of that for me so that I could have 1 or 2 days a week where I could work. And it was really, really hard. And there was nothing ever to say that I was going to make any sort of success out of this, or that I would know how to write book 2. You know, book 1 felt like a bit of a fluke, and it was incredibly hard work because I did it all the wrong way round. And I had a 2-book deal. So it was stressful. And it was difficult. And I sort of got signed. My first book was called Players, and it was a slightly different market. It was a bit glitzier. It was sort of more what was happening in the market at the time. And I was just sort of slightly copying what I was seeing selling, and what I knew was, you know, I knew these other authors who've got these amazing deals. So I was slightly trying to copy them and just do what they were doing. But it wasn't really me. And when it came to my 3rd book and I had to, you know, get a new deal and I had to pitch an idea to them, I had this idea, but it wasn't in the same niche as the first 2 books. And it was the book that became Christmas at Tiffany's. Although in my head, it was always just, it was a fashion book. It was New York, Paris, London. It wasn't a Christmas book. But they immediately saw the commercial potential of that book. And they signed me then to a 2 or 3 book deal. I can't remember. But it was a punt on my part because I'd been signed to sit in this particular place on the publisher's list. And now I was already moving off from that because I thought, well, I've got this idea, which I think is really good, but it's in a slightly different area of the market. And you might have authors who are already doing that on your list. Yeah. So you might not want me. But nonetheless, I don't think I can sustain a career or build a career and then sustain it writing books that aren't really me, that I don't really want to write or read. And I just thought, I can't do that. If I'm going to do this, I've now written 2 books. If I'm going to do this, I need to write the sort of books that I want to write and that I want to read. Otherwise, like, there's no integrity to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
so,
there is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was all, when I look at where I am now and where I started from, like I never, ever would have thought that 15 years later, I'd be 26, 27 books down the line. Like, never.
Because there's so many things that come out from what you were saying. One of them I was thinking is that when we write our book, in a sense, it's best to be in some kind of bubble and completely insulated from the news of other writers around you, because you can't help but compare. And because it's if you've been doing something completely different before, so like I was in law, you was in journalism. When you come into this new area, you have no idea how it works. So you are looking at people, you know, and then you have your expectations are built on what's happened to them. So
completely.
Yes,
I mean, we've all got our community that we're wanting to be a part of. And I was sort of breaking, and people are like, oh, but you were in journalism, you must have had contacts. They're completely separate worlds.
Yeah.
So all that journalism really did for me was teach me, and they were good things, how to write to a brief, how to write to a word count, and how to write to a deadline. Like, those are really good skills.
Being a lawyer.
Yeah.
It's not being a lawyer.
I think there is crossover though, you know, because, you know, I sort of was in this new world and I didn't know anyone, didn't know anything. I didn't know about the editing processes. I didn't know about marketing. I didn't know about retailer relationships, nothing. And you know, ever since then, really, I mean, I obviously know all about it now, but I just put my head down and I just got on with my job, which was creating a world. I was like, that's all I can do. What I realized was I can't try and be like anyone else, and I can't worry about chasing the market. Like, I've just got to write the stories I want to write, and hopefully readers will find me and they'll like what I'm doing and they'll stick with me and they'll read my other things, and, you know, that will be our community. I'll create my community. And that's what I've always done. And people say, oh, you know, do you have a particular, you know, have you got your reader in mind? No, literally, I don't think about anyone, because it's very inhibiting as soon as you start trying to bring in the outside world. I just have to inhabit the world I'm creating and let those characters be real. Like, they have to become fully three-dimensional to me. And then if they do become that to me, then I've given them, breath, I've given them flesh and blood and breath, and they're moving in their world. They are now their own thing, and out they go. And people will either love it or they won't. And I'm very sort of sanguine about it. I don't obsessively look at what else is going on in the market. Not at all. I just stay in my own lane.
I think that's the best thing to do. I think a few years ago, I went to see Oprah in New York. She was doing her tour, and Michelle Obama was appearing with her on the day that we went. Me and my best friend was just like, I know, it was like, I can't believe we're seeing Oprah. We're going to see Michelle Obama. But Michelle Obama was basically, I can't remember exactly the full details of what she was talking about, but she did say, you need to just focus on the walk that you're taking and focus on the steps that you need to take and your path. Just basically stay in your lane. Because I think the frustration comes as writers when you are looking at everyone else around you. And I did an event yesterday online, and someone asked me about writing to trends. I said, don't. You can't write to trends because you won't be authentic in what you're doing. You just need to tell the story that you want to write. And then you'll just find that you'll finish whatever book you're writing. You may find that when it's eventually published in 2 years' time, that book then becomes the trend. You can't predict those things at all.
Look at Richard Osman.
Yeah.
You could go out there now and do your cozy crime. You're still not going to be Richard Osman. Richard Osman is Richard Osman, and you're just going to be the copycat. You're going to be, at best, number 2. You're going to be Richard Osman light. Like, you've just got to be who you are and tell your own stories, because our brains are so, like, they're I think they're like our fingerprints. Like, I think they are who we are. I suppose I could do a pretty good job of reading another writer and then mimic them. I could. I'm very careful when I'm writing, actually, to not read when I'm writing, because I do absorb tone, and I live in fear that I'm just going to start regurgitating that person's tone and that person's book. So I'm pretty careful when I'm writing to not read too much. And it's that thing of, you could probably do a good approximation of someone else, but it's never going to quite have the beating heart, because it hasn't come from you, hasn't come from your DNA, your brain, your fingerprint. It's you're chasing a formula or a model or, something that really belongs to someone else. And when people say, what type of books do you write? And I always think, I don't know how to really describe them. Because I don't know, they're just, they're sort of me. Like,
Karen Swan books.
The characters aren't me, but they're from me. And if you know me, well then, my best friend, when she read my first book, and she said, oh my God, I can't put it down. And I said, are you enjoying it? And she said, it's so funny. She said, I literally feel like you're sitting at the end of the bed reading it to me, because it's my tone, it's my cadence. Like, that's me. And it's, so, it's funny. It's funny. That's the challenge when you're writing a character, and you have to write a character, particularly male for me. That's where it's really, really difficult to adjust dialogue in that way, to get their tone, to get their cadence. I'll sort of say to my husband, a man wouldn't say this. What would a man say? Because speech is so particular to all of us.
Yeah.
It's, we all have our little funny quirks, and I'm forever giving nicknames and shortenings, and but I also love beautiful language, and I get very agitated when people use words like my particular bugbear at the moment is the word anyway. And like, it appears to me that there's a whole generation coming up saying anyways. And I am single-handedly out in the Twitter sphere. No, I'm not on Twitter, but I'm out in the TikTok sphere. When people are saying anyways, I'm correcting them in the comments. Anyway.
Anyway.
Asterisk. Anyway. Please, can we speak correctly? It drives me mad. So, we all have our particular way of speaking, talking, and therefore of writing. So, yeah, be true to you, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. So once you moved into this publishing world, what surprised you most about it? Because I always think, I've said this a lot, that whatever profession you were in before, you know your place there. You've worked it, you've built it, you've carved your career. You know how it works, and then you move into this completely different world, and it's like you're starting from scratch. But also, you kind of think that the rules that worked in your previous world, it would simply apply in this new world, and they don't.
Not at all.
What surprised? No, not at all. So what surprised you the most?
The thing I found weird, and I still find it weird, is that when you are the author in publishing, because you're the creator of the product, like everything is driven from your creation. So you are treated with kid gloves, like you are treated in a way that you're not, certainly not in journalism, and certainly not at home. You're treated not like a star, but you are protected and looked after, and everyone is incredibly nice to you, and you're very sort of protected. And
you are.
And that's a lovely thing. I'm not knocking it, but as someone who was a journalist, I'm very practical. I'm very professional. I see it as a job. I know that other people cannot do their job until I've done mine. I don't drift around the house waiting for the muse to strike. I sit down and I will stare at the screen until my eyeballs bleed. But I will get my word count down. I'm practical. I'm commercially driven. What I want is to get books out there that people want to read, and that they love. And I'm very, very focused on that. And, I'm a mother of 3. I'm 110. I just don't, I'm a grown up. I don't need to be mollycoddled, but there is a lot of, it's a lovely problem to have, but I sometimes just would prefer a little bit more straight talking, actually. I'm not a child, and I just want, I want what we all want, which is to sell books. I want them to be beautiful books, and I want them to be in as many people's hands and bookshelves as possible, because that's the point of them. There's no point in them being beautiful and only 10 people read it. So,
visibility is what you want.
It is. And so it's, for me, that was a surprise. I never expected that. And I'm forever saying, if we're going out for lunch, I'm perfectly happy just to go to Itsu. I don't need to be taken to the greatest restaurant in London. It's lovely, but don't feel like you have to do that. I don't care. It's just,
you're not the first person to say that on here.
Yes.
It's like, you just want to be given the facts, be spoken to like an equal, and be open about the good and the bad and the realities of everything. And you can do that with a sandwich from Pret and a cappuccino.
Exactly.
You don't necessarily have to be the lunches are nice, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. And so it's I'm really not, but it's a lovely problem to have. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm the face of a very big team. When we do our Zoom calls, when we're doing, we've got the pre-publication meeting, and we're looking at the roundup for publicity and marketing and social media and, print media and, the subs that the retailers have picked up and all of this. There's 30 people on the call, and all of those people are involved in making that happen. And that's the thing. People see Karen Swan on the book, but there's 29 other people standing behind me who have made that book into what it is. So yeah, I think it's good for people to know that it's a team effort, and it's a much bigger industry than people realize. I mean, the amount of edit processes we go through, that was another surprise to me. Obviously, as a journalist, I was my own editor, and then it would go through to sub-editing, but that was it. As a writer, I will hand in a first draft. Most writers would hand in like their second draft, but because I do 2 books a year and my deadline is so tight, I generally don't have time to do for that 3-week rewrite in my deadline. So I hand in the first draft, everyone cries and has a very stiff gin and tonic. and then we go, okay, let's have a meeting. And then when we have that, we really pull it apart and we go, okay. And then I take 2 or 3 weeks to do my second draft. And usually it's almost a complete rewrite. It's structural, it's huge. After that, it goes to copy edit. And then after that, it goes to page proofs where it's all typeset. And we have like a proofreader come in. And there's 2 stages of that as well. So in all, you're probably looking at a minimum of 6 edits. And still stuff will go through, like there'll be a typo or a something, which is the most annoying thing in the world. But after a while you go blind, like your brain knows this story so well that it's reading for you. So I found that a surprise, just how very rigorous the edit processes are in publishing as well. It's a big deal.
Listeners, it's time for a very short break. If you're enjoying this conversation with Nadine Matheson and want to help keep the podcast going, why not buy me a cup of coffee? Your support goes such a long way in keeping these conversations flowing. Just check out the link in the show notes. I have to have a word with myself because I think with that first time I was ever received edits from an editor, you feel as though it's not a critique on your work, but on you. Because as a lawyer, I mean, as a baby lawyer, when I prepared applications and stuff, obviously I had my supervisor, so I would draft it, he or she would look at it, and then off it would go. But then, you know, with experience, it comes to a point where I'm now supervising the baby lawyer. So my applications, my briefs, I'm doing them myself, and I might give it to one of my colleagues. I'll just take a look at that section, tell me what you think. But I'm doing everything. I'm doing the editing, I'm doing the proof, and then off it goes to the judge. So you have all that control, and no one's ever turned around and said, oh, Miss Matheson, like you made a mistake with the structure of a paragraph. But then you become a writer, you become a writer, you start working with an editor, and then and it's not just a couple of comments on the manuscript. You get a completely separate document with your structural comments on it, and you're thinking, excuse me.
I know.
How dare you? You have to learn not to take it personally.
Yes, you really do. And I think most writers actually, when it gets to copy edit stage, so like the second edit stage, where they have to be so fastidious and nitpicky. Like if you say, oh, there was a bunch of peonies in the bowl on the kitchen table and it's November. It is their job to say peonies aren't in bloom in November. Like this is the level that we're talking about. And there comes such a perverse joy from sort of arguing back or getting one over on your copy editor. Actually, this is correct, or this, that, the other, or they want the Latin name for a particular bird, or do you know what I mean? You're like, oh my God. It can drive you crazy. I absolutely agree with you. When it's my agent and my editor and they're coming in hard on that first read through, and particularly because my drafts are so rough, because frankly, no one should be reading them at that point. But the reality
I always say that about my first draft. Like, that's not for anyone to read other than me, because it's a mess.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. I say to them, please make sure this doesn't go to the rest of the team, because what the hell must they think if they see my first draft? Like, if you were to see the first draft of All I Want for Christmas and then the finished copy, you would be astounded, staggered, you'd be laughing your head off, you'd be appalled, you'd be crying, like all the feelings, because it's such a mess. Because I find I don't necessarily know what the story is until I get to the end. I'm sort of living it with the characters, and it's all a bit messy and inconsistent, and in places incoherent. And I'll have changed my mind about something that I wrote at the beginning, but I haven't had time to go back there, so I'm just going to carry on. And you sort of get to the end and you think, oh my God. And, I literally, today is Wednesday, on Monday handed in my edits for the last book in my current series, the Wild Isles series. And it is the last book in the series. And I've had to tie together 4 women's stories in one. I've had 4 arcs all coalescing in this one book. It was such a huge mental load. And I was so happy and overjoyed to get this thing done, to actually make the plot and the timings work. I had characters in Canada, iced in by the sea ice, who I couldn't get back over the Atlantic until like April, because of course there were no planes in 1930. There was no transatlantic sea routes. It was all cruise liners, and there are no cruise ships like in December, January, February. So the logistics of working out my plot and all of this to tie in with the other characters. I was so happy that I had achieved this, that I handed it in thinking my editor and agent were going to think, this is amazing. She's a genius. And I was a bit peeved when I got these rather muted responses. And then I've spent the last 3 weeks doing my edit, and I'm like, holy hell. How could I let them see this? This is appalling. I am embarrassed for myself that I even let them see it, and they've seen some shockers, So now it's in a fit state, but it has been a grim couple of weeks to get it there. But you have to hear what they're saying. And of course you can disagree and argue your point, because at the end of the day, it is your book, your world, your characters, your story. But I have learned that if you have a consensus, if 2 people or more are saying the same thing, listen to them, listen to them. Definitely. They're going to be right, because if they think it, everyone else is going to think it. Sometimes you can be too much in your own head. And that's the thing. It's not your baby. You have to have a sense of distance.
You have to let it go.
You do. You've got to love it. You've got to nurture it and do everything you can to make it the best version of itself. But you also do have to let the outside world have its influence. And those people in their roles, your agent, your editor, your copy editor, your proof editor, your desk editor, they are all there, not to sort of destroy you and pull you down, but to put out the best product that can be put out with what you've provided. And it's good to sort of have that distance and that discipline of going, it's hard. There's definitely times when I do not want to do it. I have really resisted some things in the past, and I've been mad as hell, and I've been resentful. But it has always proved to be the right thing eventually, once I've got through the pain barrier with it,
Yeah, I had that with the first book in my series, The Jigsaw Man. And I was saying this last night to the group I was talking to. With my very first draft, literally nearly from the first page, I had this character called DC Clark. And I could tell you what DC Clark looked like. I could tell you that he was slightly overweight, that his shirt was slightly too tight, that he was balding and he had a bit of sunburn on his scalp. I could describe him in all this detail. And he was there from the first page right to the end of the book. And then it goes to the editor, and I get my structural edits back. And the first thing she says is, you've got too many characters. You need to lose DC Clark. And it was that, there's that anger, that frustration. Like, what are you talking about? How dare you? You have no idea what this person means to me and to the script. And I was like, I'm not saying I was like throwing my toys out the pram, but I was like, I can't believe she's saying I need to get rid of DC Clark. Like, DC Clark is He's part of the unit. He's part of the book. He's like it's the heart of the book. And then I did what I was told after I, had a word with myself, got rid of him, but I kept him back. I'm like, I'm going to bring you back. So I brought him back for a cameo in the second book. But fast forward to having a finished book in my hand, I knew that my editor's decision was the right one. I was like, she was right. It made for a better book. I didn't lose anything. I gained actually more from actually listening to her. So a lot of it is getting used to trusting someone else with your work. But I have those moments with the copy edits when I respond to the comments and a lot of 4-letter words in the response. And I'm like, you can just, but I'll delete it. I can't send it
The
back.
frustration is
like,
real.
Yeah, the frustration is so real.
It really is. But it's also so difficult. Like, to have to lose a central character is so difficult for you as the origin creator, because you've created that world, that story with them in that place. To have to go back and reshape it, refashion it in a new mold is very, very difficult. Like, the mental plasticity that you need to be able to do that, to tear down something that you've created from nothing and revisit it in a new form is a very difficult thing to do. And it's a great thing to be able to do it. And I think this is where you're a writer, because I think if you've got that mental agility, that sort of creative flexibility to be able to keep changing like that, the synapses are snapping and you're just able to keep going, keep trying different forms. That's where the creative brain is helping you to do your job. I think if you were very rigid with it and you could only see it in one form and one form only, and it's do or die, well, you've got to have that flexibility, but it's hard. Like, I've had to do that once. I'd written a book and I handed it in, and it was my first book after I'd written Christmas at Tiffany's, which had been a massive bestseller, had done incredibly well. I was so over the moon. By the time that was hitting the tills and doing really well, I was almost finished with the next book. So thank God for that, because I wasn't having to sort of effectively try and rewrite that same book, because I didn't know it was going to do as well as it did. So I'd written this other book, and I had made one creative decision in which I had decided that this woman was being stalked by her. She had amnesia, and she was being it turned out she was being stalked by her marriage counselor. Unbeknownst to me, I hadn't read this book. It had come out in hardback. Unbeknownst to me, it had been sold as a film, and with Nicole Kidman. And
Before I Go to Sleep.
Oh my God. And I handed it in, and my editor came back to me immediately, and she said, Karen, have you read Before I Go to Sleep? And I said, no. And she said, look, I know, because obviously I wasn't writing a thriller, but I had just decided on this one detail, just as like a slightly dark twist. I was writing a love story. And my story was, I had a charm bracelet. It became a necklace, but it was a charm bracelet. It was a woman with amnesia, and each charm represented a figure in her life. And unbeknownst to her, the client was her husband, and he was trying to bring her, to reacquaint her with the people in her life by triggering memories, getting her to talk and interview all these. So it was a love story. I mean, it was nothing at all to do with Before I Go to Sleep. And that one detail of, why don't I have it that her current boyfriend is someone she knew before, who's now, like, it was just a thought. But because of that, they said, by the time this book comes out, the film is going to come out, and everyone is going to think you've copied it. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, I'd just written Christmas at Tiffany's. So obviously the idea for the charm bracelet had come because I'd been researching Tiffany's. I was looking for something from Tiffany's. Yeah. I'd seen all these charms. That had given me the idea for the next book. You could see my sort of thinking from one book to the other. But I instead was getting lumped with this other book, which I hadn't read, hadn't heard about. And I thought, oh my God. And I had to go from 110,000 word book. I had to scrap down to 30,000 words. I had to take out almost everything. And the boyfriend who was the bad guy, I had to rewrite as a really nice guy. But of course, to me, he was just a villain at this point. It was so hard to recast him as this really wonderful guy. I was like, no! And I was so resisting it. But I had to do it. And more than that, I had to do it in 6 weeks. Now, I'd had a year to write the other book. But because now I handed this book in, and they said, the retailers, if they're going to accept it, need to have it in 6 weeks.
Now.
Oh, my God. I sat down and I had focus like you have never seen. And it was as a result. And so first of all, the book I ended up writing was so much better. It's one of my favorite books that I've written. It became The Perfect Present. I love the characters in that book. I love it. And I still loved the idea of that amnesia story. And I obviously can't use it now, but it was wonderful. But it was a better book as a result of that horrible experience where I was literally in tears crying down the phone to my editor, just going, you can't, like, I've written the book, I can't rewrite it in 6 weeks. And she said, you have to. Christmas at Tiffany's has done so well. We have to follow up strongly.
They need it.
And I was like, oh my God, I've just had the biggest hit of my career and now I'm about to have the biggest breakdown, like the biggest fail. And when I tell you I went into hyperfocus and I was so pleased with it. I ended up handing it in early. And that was when I realized I was able to write 2 books a year because I realized how much faffing around I'd been doing with a year, each book. It was lovely, but that I had too much time on my hands and I was drifting around the house and playing with the dogs and making too much tea and, all of which, makes me happy. But, come on, girl, you've got to work.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about writing 2 books a year, but also, just coming off the back of that, it does make you wonder if there really are like writing muses out there. Because I think in the last 6 months, I've read, 3 or 4 books where the central premise is the same. A group of people are on an island and there's a game show situation going on and then murders take place. I've read 3 books with that same central premise. And, writer A is not going to know that writer B is writing that book. But then we've reached this place where these 3 books have similar themes. And it's crazy how that can happen.
I definitely believe in the zeitgeist. There's I find almost every time I write a book, it's almost like when you buy a new car and like maybe you've just not really seen many of those cars. Like you decide to get a yellow car. Suddenly all you see are yellow cars. Yeah. And it's such a funny thing that every time I write a book, and often they're quite obscure, there's like stuff in the papers, but obscure papers. They're not necessarily Daily Mail headlines. It's like, something in Australia or Scotland or, and I send it to my editor going, look, it's not just me. It's so weird the way it happens. And there's like an energy out there. And I think, we do pick it up without knowing that we do. It's happened on so many occasions with me that I'm just like, yep, there it is. Told you this is the book. Because these references are coming.
Yeah, I had the exact same scenario took place yesterday while I was standing in my kitchen. So I've just finished writing book 4 in my series, delivered that last week. And there's this central theme going through it. And I kept thinking, are they going to be convinced by that? I'm not sure if they're going to be convinced by that. It just seems a little bit out there. And then I'm in my kitchen. And then the exact scenario I explore in my book, it's on the lunchtime news on the radio. What?
How very dare you?
The news is, how dare you? But then also it's like, it's validation.
Exactly. I know. Honestly, do you know, I was out for a girls' dinner last week and I saw one of my friends, and she'd been to Hawaii for the summer with her family, and it was like this amazing holiday, and I couldn't wait to see her, and I so badly want to go there. And I said to her, oh my God, just tell me everything. I said, was your holiday amazing? And she went, Karen, it was bloody awful. And I went, I'm sorry, what? She went, no, it was the worst holiday of my life. And I said, no. I said, shut up. I said, no, stop. What are you saying? And she said, it was so bad. And she proceeded to tell me this litany of disasters, which started at the airport when they arrived and they couldn't get their luggage in the car. And then her husband and two of her sons are 6'4". They didn't fit in the car. Like, this is where it began. And by the time she got, it was I was literally on hands and knees on the floor in the kitchen, belly laughing. Like, I couldn't even stand at a certain point. And I said to her, if I was to put this in a book, no one would believe this would happen because it's too many disasters one after another. And yet it's exactly what happened. And, life can be stranger than fiction, that's for sure.
Life, it can. I had a question to ask you before we move on, because I'm watching the time and I'm like, oh my God, it's flying by. Because you was talking about, and I know how much planning, and I say planning, but, when you're doing the rewrite and having to restructure things and take characters out and reorganize. And basically I would say it's like you've already got a house, you've had to knock the house down and you're now rebuilding a house again from the bricks. Does it ever frustrate you when you hear critics out there talk down about what they'll say about is commercial fiction?
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's romance, crime, writing. But it's not, because the amount of work, the amount of work you're talking about that you put into your books, the amount of work that I put into my books, and then people will diminish it.
It is it is so frustrating. And it's funny because I picked up Victoria Hislop's The Island quite recently. I hadn't read it for years. I just had a need to read it. And I picked it up. And what I noticed on the front was there was a quote from The Observer. And it said, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly, but it said something like, at last, a beach read with heart. And I just thought, oh my God, this book has sold millions. This is a book that people still talk about 10 years later. This is a book that had such an incredible impact, like on the just general culture as a whole. Like, it was a fabulous, fabulous story about something that was really worth telling. And what I thought was, would they have said that if a man had written it?
Probably not.
Do you know what I mean? Would they call a book like that a beach read? And because that's what they said. They didn't just say, this is a book with great heart. It's a beach read with heart. We're going to take it down, but then lift it up a little bit. And I just thought, if William Boyd had written this book, they wouldn't call, do you know what I mean? Like, oh, it makes me mad. And I think, I did an English degree. I did Old English, Middle English. Like, that was sort of my thing. Yeah. I really know language, and I know cadence. I know meter. I just know beautiful sentencing structures. And I understand what good literature is. Now, I'm not personally trying to write literary fiction. I don't have the time. I have a family. I can't afford to take 5 years to write a book. We have bills to pay. And frankly, who wants to wait that long? I don't want to spend 5 years in that world. I get bored.
No.
So, it's not what I want to do, but it doesn't mean that I'm doing my job slapdash or that it's written to a formula. Every single book stands alone. All of my books are written in a different way. They are not formulaic. I will change how I write. I might have a past-present timeline. I might have a completely historical story, in which case I've had to do a shed load of research on the Spanish Civil War or the Second World War or an island off the coast of Scotland in 1930. I mean, I do my work. And I feel that because books will be packaged in a certain way, they sort of get dumbed down. And I understand that the art of marketing and branding and all of that, you know, you're trying all the time to appeal to the widest possible reader. You're trying to appeal to people. People are buying their books in supermarkets because they're busy. You know, they don't, and also shopping habits have changed. We don't necessarily go down to the high street on a Saturday afternoon in the way we used to.
Yeah.
People aren't browsing bookshops anymore. You know, so if you've got people picking up your book in the supermarket, that's a brilliant thing because they're still keeping books in their lives. But therefore, it's just got to appeal. It's got to stand out in an environment that doesn't have soft lighting or beautiful wood bookshelves, or do you know what I mean? You've got to, you know, they've got the Kellogg's cornflakes and they've got coffee and, you know, and then you've got a book. Like, it's got to be able to be seen and to look beautiful, but to be pick-upable. And, you know, so there's an awful lot going on. And I feel that with a lot of, I understand why books get packaged the way they do, but it's not always representative of the quality of what's inside. And I know that a lot of my readers come to my books because I have a very large backlist now. And what I have really noticed in my messages that I get from people is I have a lot of readers who have cancer and they're sitting in the chemo chair for 8 hours and they need something, they can't move, and they need something to take them away from this awful reality that they find themselves in right now. And what they do is they sit there and they pick up my book and it takes them away for that time. And then they go, oh, she's written all these other books. So then they read my other books. And the messages I get from people who are facing really horrible scenarios, they've got a lot of fear, and they need reassurance, and they need comfort, and they need to live something better. And my books and other people's books can do that for them. I've had readers who have lost their children, and they've written to me and with incredible messages. I wrote a book about people going missing, and I couldn't believe it when actually an excerpt from my book was read out at this missing people's charity at St. Martin in the Fields Church at Christmas. Like, you know, these books don't aspire. They're not trying to change people's lives by winning awards. I'm not trying to win awards, but I still think I can make a very big difference to someone's day. I'm not going to change their life, but I can change their day. You know, I can give them a 3-day mini break and then some characters that will live on with them for a while afterwards. That's what I can do. I'm not aspiring to do more than that, but there's real validation in that. Like, we all live stressful lives. We're increasingly isolated. You know, this is a way of connecting with people. And it's frustrating to be reduced to a beach read, an easy read, a light read, because these books are written with care and attention to detail and a lot of research and focus. And frankly, they're written with respect for the reader. If I didn't care, if I didn't respect the people who are reading them, I would just write to a formula. That would be so easy for me to do. I could then write 4 books a year. And, you know, I could just count the pennies coming in and whatever, doesn't matter. And I don't do that because I care about putting out a book that is an experience that is completely unique to the book that went before and to the book that's coming after. And, you know, it's just reductive to be labeled. But that is the reality of, you know, the industry. You know, the print media just, I'm afraid there's a lot of sexism towards women writers because most of your reviewers are men. And it annoys me to have to say it because I don't want to come across as some whinging feminist, because I'm not. I am completely a feminist. But, you know, it frustrates me in this day and age that this is something we have still.
Yeah, I think that is the frustration, that you think in this day and age we will be way, way, way past that. But then it seems with another new book that's published, that it just resurfaces again, or it just shows that it just never went. And, you're talking about the impact of our books. And I remember I had a reader email me. I think she was in the States, and she said she hadn't picked up a book since her daughter had died. And, sometimes emails appear in your spam folder, and I was going through the spam folder, and these emails, and it'd been sent months and months ago. And she said she'd picked up one of my books and she started reading, and she said it got her back into reading after such a long gap, because of this awful tragedy in her life. And when I started writing a book about a serial crimes unit, I wasn't thinking about, it could have that impact. You're telling a story, and you want to tell a good story, and I suppose you do want to give people escapism, but the effect that your books can have, your writing can have, it's so it goes beyond just entertaining someone.
It really does.
So.
Yeah. And I think when people are snobby about books, like ours, books that appeal to a wide audience, they're not disrespecting us, they're disrespecting the readers, the people who are actually taking something from those books. It might be the exhausted mother breastfeeding through the night. It might be the cancer sufferer. It might be the widow. I've got a reader at the moment. Her husband has been in hospital for 23 weeks. She emails me every week and we just have a chat. She loves the books. Books just connect people. They give people hope. They give them escape. And, they're important. Doesn't matter how people take their books, whether they listen to them, whether they're on a Kindle, whether they're, old school paperback, whatever it is, they matter. And it's just so narrow-minded to, take away, to diminish their value to people.
Yeah, definitely. Right. So Karen, before I go on to our last set of questions, I have to obviously ask you about All I Want for Christmas, which I have. I'm showing, even though no one else can see it because I'm showing you. And I love this book. I was like, I love it. But what I was going to, is it hard? Do you find it difficult to talk about this book now, All I Want for Christmas, considering that you write 2 books a year? So I don't even know what book you're working on.
Yeah.
This has already come and gone.
Yeah, it is difficult because right now that book has just come out. I've literally just finished the edits for the book that's coming out next summer. And I'm already researching the book I'm about to start writing. So I call this my pinch point, and it happens twice a year where I've got 3 books in my head. And it's terrible because I'll go, oh God, what was that character called? And people think, how can you not know? But it's because...
Oh, easy.
That was 2 worlds away for me now. So, I went to Copenhagen this time last year, went out on half term with my daughter. And my poor daughter, I dragged her around the city because I don't do the touristy things. I don't go to museums or any of that. I go to the city and I want to feel it as a local. So I walk around all the houses and I'm taking pictures of people's gardens. I mean, there must be wanted at Interpol of me all over Europe. And, I wrote that book a year ago. I finished it just after Christmas. It was a tough book to write, actually, because, again, it was one that I had an idea of what it was going to be. And actually, it ended up not being what I thought it was going to be. And that was a little bit weird to accept. I was like, like I had this very distinct first scene for the book, which I ended up having to take out. It was like the prologue scene was going to be these 2 characters standing outside of a library and waiting for it to be opened because there was going to be a bequest that was being unsealed. And that was going to be quite an almost like cinematic moment of these 2 people on this street in Copenhagen in the January light and December light. And it ended up not being that because I sort of got through and I worked out the plot and I was like, well, this is now not the moment we need to have in the prologue. Yeah. And that was sort of weird. So that was a messy first draft that landed in my editor's inbox.
It's No, so it's a number of things when that happens. On one hand, you're like, I can't believe, like, I've worked so hard on this piece and it's beautiful and I love it. Like, I had a scene like that with the last book I've just finished. And I've got this, and I still think it's a brilliant scene that takes place, the whole setup and the resolution of it. And then I got to the end of the book and I realized this does not work anymore. It doesn't work. And I have to take it out. And I didn't want to take it out because I had everyone there. And it was, like you said, it was almost cinematic in how it took place. But then I realized it didn't serve its original purpose. So
exactly. And you have to have that discipline to go, no, I want it, I love it, but it just doesn't serve the story now. And you have to let it go. But it's hard.
Yeah, I didn't even do the cut it and put it in a separate folder. I just selected it and pressed delete. I was like, no, it has to go. And we need to keep it.
And it's funny how when you do, as soon as you've done it, you let it go. It's gone. Yeah. Like, for as long as it's in there, you're like, oh, can I make it work? Can I re-angle it? What can I do? As soon as you've made the emotional cutoff, gone.
Yeah.
And you never think about it again.
Never think about it at all. Right, so Karen, I have some questions. Are you an introvert or extrovert or a hybrid of the two?
Well, this is probably no surprise. I'm an introvert. Everyone, of course, thinks I'm an extrovert because I'm loud and I'm animated. But I will literally now go and lie down for 24 hours. Only the dogs will be allowed to come near me. Like, I need so much time on my own. Yeah. Thank God I get to work in my study on my own and no one can see me, talk to me, leave me alone. Like, I am such an introvert. I find I love seeing my friends and I burn brightly when I'm out, but oh my God, like the energy that it takes from me, like it is a tax. And I need so much time on my own. And so people think I'm an extrovert, but I am an introvert.
You're an introvert. Okay, so what challenge or experience in your life shaped you the most?
I think it was when my husband lost his job. And it was at the time, would you believe it, when, I told you I had to rewrite that book in 6 weeks.
Oh, no.
The exact same time that happened. And I'll add into that, as well as that. So my book has just come out. It's done amazingly well. And I'm getting royalty checks, which are keeping us going. But my husband had just lost his job. And our dog had just had puppies. So when I tell you the chaos in our house at that time, but first of all, what it meant was, thank God my husband was at home because he could take care of the puppies. And I was able to just work. If I'd had to write a book in 6 weeks and deal with puppies, no.
It's nice.
So thank God, in a weird sort of way, that happened. And we ended up having a court case with his employer. It never got to court because they settled because they knew it was all false. But it was a horrible thing to go through. But what it showed me, it was all political, but what it showed me was that I could not, my husband's job was safe as houses, just people need what he does. And it was such a shock that this could have happened. It was, I can't go into details about it, but it was a very large global case that happened. It was a big Old Bailey trial. And it was my husband's team who sorted everything out, discovered this thing. And then there was political repercussions afterwards in which they wanted heads to roll, his being one of them, even though his team had, their processes had worked. It was a horrible thing to go through. And we had to take them to court. We couldn't allow them to bully effectively. And so we did that. And I was having to write this book under incredibly stressful circumstances. And it made me realize that my job was no mere hobby. I really needed to take this very, very seriously. We could not rely on one income. And I was always very serious about my career, but this was the point at which I realized I have to throw everything into my writing. And I was like, do you know what? I actually can write 2 books a year. Like my focus was just a laser at that point because our whole world was about to fall apart. Our children were young. Like it was I don't know, this was like 2010, 2011, something like that. Our children were little. Like, I had to really step up and take my career very seriously. And that was the point at which I really then sort of found another gear and just went hell for leather. I just thought, I'm doing this. Yeah. Tough time.
Yeah, I've always, it is. And, I've spoken a lot in previous conversations about, I think, that realization for authors that this is a business. And I think there's always something that happens that makes you have that realization, and then it completely changes your approach to the task of writing. And yes, you write for the love of it and you want to tell stories, but then you're now you're hyper aware of the fact that this is a business and you need to approach it that way in order to get the success that you want.
Exactly. It's there's nothing fluffy about it, that's for sure.
No,
it's not
it's really not. It's not. So if you could go back to when you were 25 years old and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Be bolder. I was very sort of protective of myself. I was always very safe. I didn't take risks. And I wish I'd just been more prepared to fail and to mess up. I'm sort of the eldest daughter. I'm the oldest of three.
Me too.
And I think that's so sort of a thing. Like, I always had to be really on it and just set a good example and be responsible. And, and I am, and I always have been. And I just sort of wish I could have been a bit freer and a bit more prepared to fail and mess up. I would have had more adventures. And I think as well, I would have just learned some things earlier, because really it's when life goes wrong that you learn the big lessons.
Yeah.
If you go through life just trying to protect yourself, to insulate yourself from anything ever happening, well, then nothing ever happens to you. And how do you grow? And as a writer, you have to have seen a certain amount of the world. You have to have had experiences in order to be able to have any sort of perspective for your characters. Yeah. So I think, I should have gone wild and crazy. I should have been about it.
It should have been bad. So another advice question. What piece of advice do you wish you'd been told earlier in your writing career?
Oh, well, I wish I'd been told to write fiction sooner. It's one piece of advice that I did have when I was a journalist was I'd written an article for an American magazine, the Hamptons magazine, and she said, you just need to relax your style. She said, it's very formal. And like, I went to a school where we couldn't ever write in the first person. We couldn't say I, we had to say one. So like I was really formal. So I was like, really, it was like the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. So it was so formal. And my writing was very, very formal. And then I went to Vogue magazine and I was working with Felice Armstrong, who is now at the Telegraph. She did Vogue and then the Times, and then she's at the Telegraph. And she's an amazing writer. And she was a great person to learn from. She sort of really helped me just relax my style, just let some air in. And even now, sometimes I was editing and I was like, oh my God, this scene is so tightly structured that I simply can't insert another sentence into here without the whole thing falling apart. Like, it only works in this rigid structure. And I think generally that's a sign I'm getting a bit uptight. Just need to let things have a bit of air in them. So sort of from those two different editors, I sort of absorbed that lesson of just letting my style relax a bit and not become too uptight.
Style is such a funny thing. Because I remember my English teacher always used to say, when it came to my creative writing, she goes, it's very conversational. She goes, I feel like I'm in a conversation, and even now I recognize that as my style. Even writing the sort of books I write, I can see that conversational style in there. So
but that's so nice, you see, because that's what people want. They, people are in it then, because then it's organic. Then it's got a pulse.
Oh yeah, I like that. You want it to. That's what you want. So finally, Karen, where can listeners of the conversation find you online, if you are online?
Oh, please come and find me on Instagram at Swanee Writes. I don't do Twitter. Oh, I don't even call it X. I call it Twitter. I don't do Twitter because there's too much anger. And Facebook drives me potty because people will send me a message. But if I click on it, it doesn't take me to the message. It just takes me to my page. And then I have to find the message, at which point I've forgotten what it was. So I find Instagram super user-friendly. And I go on there every single day. And if someone has written to me, I will write back to them. Like I communicate on Instagram. So my Instagram is linked to my Facebook. So people think I'm on Facebook, but no, I'm only actively two-way on Instagram. And I'm not allowed on TikTok because my teenage daughter would literally die. She would literally die if she saw her mother pop up on her FYP. She hates the fact that I know what an FYP is. So I won't be on TikTok.
It's teenagers and TikTok are absolutely hilarious.
She's so territorial.
They're extremely territorial about it. My niece was like, Auntie, why are you on TikTok? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I have books. I need to sell books.
Darling, we need to sell books. Yes. If I said that, she'd be like, Mummy, I'm literally leaving home and I'm changing my name.
Oh, so Karen, that just leaves me to say, and I've absolutely loved talking to you. It just leaves me to say thank you so much, Karen Swan, for being part of the conversation.
I have loved it. This has been so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's conversation with Nadine Matheson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a brand new episode featuring more amazing guests. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the podcast grow. And if you'd like to support the show, you can buy me a cup of coffee or sign up on Patreon. The links are in the show notes. And if you'd love to join the conversation as a guest, feel free to send an email to theconversation@nadinematheson.com. Thanks again for your support, and I'll catch you next time.